So we have our kimchi here that we made last time, and it turned out okay. I would say it's good enough to eat on its own, but am I like a master of making kimchi, or am I even like good at making it? No. It was really good to make soup with, so I had this idea to use it to make pot roast, and I did this like once before just to make sure that it actually works, and it did. So I'm actually teaching you something that tastes good. I had this chuck roast and I used it with the kimchi, and I kind of made almost like a kimchi jjigae, and then I cooked them all together for like 5 hours. The great part about my decision to use the bok choy for kimchi was that there were so many like separate vegetables and stuff in this with the daikon radish, the bok choy, and the garlic chives. It almost was like it already came with a vegetable side, but we're gonna throw in some potatoes right like 45 minutes before it's done, just so we had like a little extra stuff. Now when you're making a pot roast, some people like to sear their beef beforehand just to get a little crust. It's pretty much just stewing meat, so it doesn't really do much for the texture. In fact, if you over sear your beef, it could end up being a little on the tougher side. So I just like to put it in, even though it doesn't necessarily look as great. It still tastes good, and it has the like less opportunities where like you can mess with the texture of a really good pot roast. So we're gonna do this over here. Okay. So because we're using kimchi, the process is pretty easy since a lot of the vegetables have already been processed. We're still going to give things a little bit of a head start by kind of like sauteing the kimchi paste and the vegetables in a little bit of oil before deglazing with the chicken stock and then adding the beef. So because there's a lot of chives and the kimchi paste is made with a base of onions, the onions will still have an opportunity to caramelize as they cook, and that will give us like a much richer flavor. When you're making pot roast with kimchi, just be aware that kimchi is already very, very salty. So you want to season your meat actually just a little bit less than you normally do. Still do it, but just a little bit less. So once your kimchi has cooked down enough and it's starting to get really, really fragrant, maybe a little spicy air action going on, it will be ready to be deglazed with chicken stock. This is just a basic store-bought chicken stock. I wouldn't bother using anything like homemade or anything that I took a lot of time on, because we're dealing with so much flavor already. If you use like a chicken stock that you actually spent time making, it might get lost in this. You could even get away with using, I would say, low sodium chicken stock if you had that, because we're trying to control the amount of salt that we're putting in this at this point. This guy. To kind of complement the beef that we're gonna add to this stew that's going on already, we're gonna use some spices. I've got some star anise here, and when you add star anise in with cooking onions, it produces a compound that like makes our brains like think of beef. So actually a lot of Chinese recipes use onions and star anise when they're cooking beef, and it just makes it taste even beefier. If you don't eat meat, you can do that with like sauteed mushrooms or something like that. Some black pepper, and then we're going to add in some white pepper, cumin. I like lots of cumin in mine. Coriander and fennel. all of those spices in my mind kind of like serve as a waypoint between like the richness and the like the bright, vibrant flavors that you get from making kimchi, as well as like the rich flavors that you were gonna get by putting in like a fatty piece of meat in here for a really long time. So now that this thing is boiling, we're just going to turn the heat down and add in our chuck. This is always so much food. There we go. Let it come back up to a simmer, and once it does, turn the heat off, cover, and then stick in the oven to slow cook for like 5 hours. And when I say in the oven, I would say like 215 degrees. So that's done. Okay. I forgot to do this before. I should have done it at the beginning, but it's fine because we still have a little bit more cooking left to do. Just a little bit of chicken powder in there to give it some like umami-ness. And it is fine because we still have to add the potatoes. So in these go. And I just like to use tiny potatoes because then I don't peel them. So this took a little bit more time than I expected. I thought that this would need 5 hours of time in the slow cooker in the braise pretty much. As it turns out, it needed like 7. Don't know why. When I did this before, it just needed 5, but now it is nice and tender and it took 7. So that's just how it works sometimes, I guess. Obviously, the wait is absolutely worth it because nothing is more depressing than like a chewy, leathery brick chuck roast when the alternative could be something like tender and gorgeous like this. While chuck steaks don't have that sexy black crust that you'd get with a steak or a roast, just the tenderness of being braised in the liquid for that long of a time just makes up for it in the texture and the absolute flavor that comes in with this way of cooking it. Adding a bit of the broth adds like a stew element to it that just makes everything so satisfying. The vegetables are delicious, albeit a little soft from the slow cooking. This, at the end of the day, does serve to be a one-pot meal. Oh my God. Oh, that's so tender. I got like a piece that should have been, you know, one of those pieces that you know should have been like tough and chewy, but because it took so long, it just like melted in your mouth. That's what I got just now. And because I didn't peel the potatoes, I just like put them in a hole like this. They held up to the extra like couple hours of cooking really well. They're still snappy and they just soaked up that flavor like a sponge. The disadvantage you get for cooking a roast in this way would be the fact that it took so long. But that being said, you saw how I put it together. You saw that it was just pretty much just throwing all this stuff into a pot and then sticking it in the oven. Because it was in the oven, you could leave it alone for the entire day. Leave your house, do whatever you needed to do, come back, and dinner is done. So say you did this in the morning, even with the extra couple hours that it required to be really, really tender,
you still would have been able to say if you did it by, if you had this in the oven by 10 or 9 o'clock, you'd still have dinner ready by like 6 or 7. And you didn't really have to do all that much. Oh, except for make some like subpar kimchi. It just falls apart. It's like, Try the daikon. Well, this daikon tastes like French fries. The formerly kimchied bok choy. It's not mush. It just tastes really tender, but it still has that like vegetable like crunch crispness to it. I'm very impressed with how all of this held up. Oh. I want a bowl of rice with this so bad. This would be perfect with like a bowl of rice. So yes, I would say that you can use some bok choy kimchi, which was admittedly less than perfect, to use as a base to make a pot roast with. It is so intensely flavorful. If my kimchi wasn't like overly spicy before, this probably wouldn't be as spicy, but this is great. I am gonna do this a lot. And that's our show, I guess. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.